A company's executive is selecting a liquidity source that it can use without affecting its normal operations. The executive will most likely A, utilize the cash in the company's bank account. This would probably be very minimally disruptive to normal operations since we're just taking cash out of the bank account. Nothing should really change there. So I'd lean towards A as being our correct answer. B, negotiate a debt contract on behalf of the firm. This is going to be more likely to affect operations than using cash, since this is going to take resources away from the company and potentially change where money is coming from, and it could certainly disrupt operations. And C, file for bankruptcy protection and reorganization. This will certainly interrupt normal operations. Answer A. DEF Investment Group invested $150 million in a private equity fund with a 2.5% management fee based on the end-of-year asset management and a 20% incentive fee, which are calculated independently. Independently meaning we don't need to account for the management fee to calculate the incentive fee. The fund specifies a hurdle rate of 8%. In the first year, the fund yielded a return of 15%, and in the second year, it grew by 20%. The incentive fee paid in the second year is closest to. So this is going to be a little longer calculation because we need to calculate 2 years worth of returns in order to get our, let me see the best place to put this. We'll go right here. And we'll go down, sorry. So we're going to need to do some work on year 1 and year 2 to get our ending and starting AUMs. So year 1 ending AUM is going to be this 15% return multiplied by our starting AUM of 150 million, gets us to 172.5. Management fees are going to be 2.5% of that, so 4.3125 million. Profit above our hurdle, we're going to take 172.5 minus 150. Since we are not taking out, since these are independent, we're not taking out the management fee. And then we're going to subtract out 150 times 0.08. So that gives us a profit above the hurdle of 10.5. Multiplying this by our incentive fee gets us to 2.1. So our starting AUM in year 2 then is going to be this ending AUM and then subtracting out our fees. So we subtract out the management fee calculated up here and subtract out that incentive fee, which gives us year 2 starting AUM of 166.075. Now from here, we can go ahead and calculate the incentive fee paid in the second year. Ending AUM is going to be that 20% return times the starting AUM, so we're at just under 200 million. Profit above that hurdle is going to be this 199 minus the starting AUM, and then we're subtracting out the starting AUM times the hurdle profit of 8%. So that gives us a profit above profit above the hurdle of 19.9305 million. Multiply this by our 20% incentive fee, gives you a incentive fee of 3.9861, which if we round that, that'll be closest to answer C. An investor buys 300 shares of XYZ at the market price of $200 on full margin. The initial margin requirement is 30%. So full margin meaning we put up 30% equity and we finance the rest. Full margin does not mean we put up we used 100% margin. And the maintenance margin requirement is 20%. If the shares of the stock are later sold for $250 per share, what is the margin transaction return? So let's pull in our formulas here. First thing we want to do is understand our initial equity. So our initial equity is going to be that 30% that we put up times the 200 per share. Gives us equity per share of $60. The increase in share was $250 minus the 200 that we bought for. So that's a 50% increase in our equity. Return is going to be ending value divided by beginning value minus 1. So we have ending value of $60 equity plus that 50% increase. And then we're dividing that by beginning equity of 60. Gives us a return of 0.8333, which would be 83%. Answer B. Market index contains these 3 securities. Securities A, B, and C, and we have their price and market cap. Which approach will most likely give security A the highest weight? So the easiest way to do this is just calculate all 3. So for price weighting, which is A. We're going to do 2.5, which is A. And then we're going to divide that by the prices of all three of these added up. So that gives us a weighting of 0.064 or 6.4%. Under equal weighting, we're going to have 33%, since we're just going to divide these into thirds. And then market cap weighting, we're going to take the market cap. So we've got 2,000, and then we're going to divide that by all three of these added up. So 2,000 plus 234 plus 1,234 gives us a market cap weighting of just under 58%. So that'll be C. Market cap weighting gives us the highest weight. Exhibit 1 shows the dividends paid by 2 Asian companies for the past 5 years. And we've got those numbers here. Which company or companies would most likely be valued using the Gordon Growth Dividend Discount Model? We've got Yukeman, Chentao, or both. So what we need to figure out here is, for the dividend discount model, we want to have a constant dividend, or we want to have a constant growth rate for our dividend. And so what we want to do here, we'll bring this in, is we just go through and we're going to calculate the growth rates for each of these dividend increases over time. So for Yukeman, we had a 20% increase in year from 2014 to 15, and then about a 20% again, 20% and 20%. So this would be a good candidate for the dividend discount model because we want that constant dividend growth rate. For Chentao, however, we had a 15% growth, then a 35, then 13, then 20. This is a little too volatile for the Gordon growth model to be effective. And so we will go with A. This would most likely only be used for the Yukeman company. In which of the following types of preference shares are shareholders most likely entitled to receive the standard preference dividend plus a premium dividend if profits exceed a specified level? We've got A, cumulative preference shares. This is not going to be what's described here. Cumulative preference shares is essentially if the company has to miss or not pay out a dividend, that's going to accumulate and become cumulative. So when profits are higher in the future, they have to pay out that missed dividend and the current dividend. B, participating preference shares. That is going to be what's described here. And I don't have anything else to add other than these types of shares get this dividend preference and some premium, depending on profits. And then non-cumulative are going to be the opposite of cumulative, where if a dividend payment is missed then or not able to be paid, then the shareholders unfortunately just miss out on that, and it's not going to accumulate like in cumulative shares. Answer B. Which of the following is a correct statement regarding the advantages of the asset-based valuation models? They A, take into account current or expected cash flows, earnings, or growth rates. Asset-based valuation models are going to be focused on the balance sheet, not the income statement and cash flow statement, which is what's being described in A. So we can rule that out. B, are usually the best standalone option for valuing firms as ongoing concerns. We can also rule this out. For a going concern, we're going to be more focused on these things up here. So cash flow, earnings, is the firm continuing to generate cash, and will they be able to continue as a company? Just because you have a lot of assets on your balance sheet doesn't mean that you're making money off those assets. C, are particularly useful in valuing firms that are heavy in current assets and light in intangibles. That is going to be our correct answer. Current assets are more easy to be valued in the marketplace, whereas intangibles are not. So if they don't have a lot of intangibles and they have a lot of current assets, then that gives us a better idea of what the assets on the balance sheet are actually worth. Answer C. Using the Gordon Growth Dividend Discount Model and assuming that R is greater than G, which is greater than 1%, what would be the effect of a 1% decrease in both the required rate of return and the constant growth rate on the stock's current valuation? Assume that there is no change to the current dividend payment, DO. So would the current valuation increase? Would the current valuation decrease? Or would the current valuation remain unchanged? So I'm going to pull in our formula to describe this. So if looking at the denominator first, if R goes down by 1 and G goes down by 1, this whole formula, this whole portion of the formula is going to stay the same. So there's going to be no effect on the denominator. However, in the numerator, we only have G. So if G is going down and this number is staying flat, the same, that's going to lead to 1 plus G and multiplying by DO. This whole variable ends up giving us D1. And so if G goes down, D1 is also going to go down because we're not multiplying by as big of a number. And since this is staying the same, numerator is going down. Our current valuation then is going to decrease. Answer B. A trader purchases 1,000 shares of HYA at a price of 30 per share using a leverage ratio of 2. Leverage ratio of 2 means we're using half debt, half equity. The maintenance margin is 25%. If the maintenance margin is 25%, then the stock price at which the trader will receive a margin call is closest to. We'll bring in our margin call price formula. And I put this down here. So leverage ratio of 2 means half debt, half equity. And our margin call price is going to be price. So that'll be 30. And then we're multiplying that by 1 minus initial margin. And initial margin we're imputing based on this leverage ratio. So our initial margin will be 50% since we're using half debt, half equity. And then we're dividing that by 1 minus the maintenance margin. So maintenance margin is 25%. So we're going to be looking at margin call price of 20 after we work through this math. Answer C. Which of the following is most likely a similarity between common and preferred shares? Is it A, both have voting rights? That's going to be incorrect. Common shares are going to have voting rights, but preferred shares will not. B, both make fixed periodic payments. That's also not going to be a similarity. Common stocks may pay out dividends that tend to be fixed. However, they're not contractual obligations, whereas preferred shares are going to make those fixed periodic payments. And C, both can have put and call features. That is going to be the similarity. They can both have options tied to them. Answer C.